So we're back, everyone that's online enjoying us on here. Hope everybody enjoyed lunch. I'm trying a couple of things out today. First thing is getting away from the PowerPoint slide. Ooh, dangerous. Okay? And the second thing is I want us not just to have fun, but I want us to be fun in this. And I want you to think back. Think back. For some of you, it will be a much shorter journey than me. Gavin, maybe a bit more longer. I want you to think back to when you're on the playground as kids. Okay? What was there on the playground? Maybe some monkey bars. What else? Variety, some swings, jungle gym, something like that. What was the rest of that field, especially at the school recesses? What was it filled with? Trees, rocks, mostly barren land, yeah? Soccer field, etc. So I'm certain that all of you, during those recesses at some point, were bored. And how did you get around that boredom? Made shit up, right? We made shit up. That's a great example. But yeah, we used our imagination, right? You pretended that you were a Squirtle, okay. Yeah, but here's the thing. That is an innately human experience, to pretend yourself to be maybe not a Squirtle, but something. Okay, fair enough. But in all sorts of cultures, and all over the world, right, what do children do? They make up games. We already have this innately within us. Children, young children, are the best game designers in the world. Because you can give them anything at all, and they will turn it into a game. They'll turn it into an opportunity for play. But I think we lose that. We lose that imagination. We lose that ability over time. Because a thing becomes a thing, right? And it should only be used in one way, right? So the fork that you get at the dinner table has to be used in the appropriate way. Right? Don't be poking your sister with that fork, sir. That's not allowed. You can't do that. Yeah, don't touch the outlet with the fork, right? But so much of of parents is to prevent these things from happening, right? Because we don't want certain dangers to happen. But as we grow up, things become things. So I want us to go back into that mindset. So here I have an object in my hand. What is this object? No, it's not. It's not a pencil today. What is it? It's a magic wand. The magic wand today. What else could this be? Sword. Drumsticks. You need two of them, right? The drumstick. Chopsticks. Okay? Poking people. Okay, a poker. Form. Not the game thereof, but like something to utilize. What else is this? So this is a tiny person from Gulliver's Travels. Okay. Yeah, from Lilliput. Not the place in Norway, but the mystical land of the small peoples in which they tie up Gulliver inside of. Okay, so this is a Lilliputian now. Okay, what else could this be? A person, right? So this is my imaginary friend Chuck the Pencil, or Eraserhead. What else could it be? Slingshot, okay. me a rubber band and I can turn it into a slingshot. Yeah. Okay. Oh, a detonator. Okay. So I'm now playing the movie Speed, right? What do you do to the hostage? Okay. So a detonator. Okay. Don't say that too loudly inside of a university, sir. You're gonna. Has anyone not suggested something yet? There's no voice. A stick. Stick. Yeah, it's a stick. Flute. Coffee stirrer. Okay, do we have anything from the online group? Anyone online got a? Not yet? Okay. So I think we can come up with a lot of things that this can be, other than just a pencil. And part of this also has to do with our theming of this, right? Because we have things like magic wands and swords and et cetera kind of coming out of fantasy. We have things like chopsticks coming out of utilitarian usage. We've got detonators coming out of, you know, the movie Speed. So how we see this also has to do with kind of the theming of what world we're trying to work with. And we're also trying to look at what does this object do? How does it feel in our hand? What does it allow us to do? The chief thing that this allows us to do is write and erase. There's so many other things that this can be utilized for. I can break it, yeah, and turn it into something for fighting, you know, vampires or whatever, right? Oh yeah, I could born supremacy here over there, right? Okay. So this number 2 pencil has now become all of these things that we can utilize inside of our game. So this one object has a lot of things that it affords us the ability to do, dependent upon what our conceptual model of the world that we're working in allows it to do. Now there's 2 big writers on this. The one is Don Norman. Probably seen maybe The Psychology of Everyday Things with the backwards teapot that I always harp on about. But before that, there was also Gibson. And Gibson was more looking at this from the psychological aspect. And so Gibson said that the affordance of an object is this list. It's everything that we can come up with. Any use of this object whatsoever that is conceivable that we can come up with it is what this object affords us the ability to do. Maybe it might have some issues with being a good magic wand, but this is a magic wand for all intents and purposes. Maybe it's not a useful magic wand, but it is a magic wand. Maybe this is not a useful sword. This is what sets apart Norman's idea of affordances. Norman is the guy that hates doors. Right? Because it should be push and pull and you shouldn't be confused about that. It gets into the idea of how to signify that this is a pencil. Because it could be any of these things. Come with a whole list. If you were an alien from Alpha Centauri that came to Earth and you have no idea of anything to do with human civilization and culture and no one has told you what this object is or explained to you and you just found this, what would you think it is? It could be anything on that board. What would inform you that this is a pencil? What would signify that that's the case? Perhaps the fact that it marks paper, and if I hold it, it looks like something that would be held within a hand, or a tentacle if I'm from Alpha Centauri. and I can work with this. So there's maybe some other limitations with the fact that we're big, giant ape-like creatures that have the ability in order to work with this object in this way. The other thing is we could signify these things to each other, right? We can have markings on the object, and if we understand the language of the culture involved, we could maybe figure out its use via that. We might look at the context in which this object is found, what other pieces found it. Now, I'm talking about this rather hypothetically, right? But we deal with this all the time. It's called archaeology. If you go and you find an artifact, it's anything. That's why so many things, it's like, we believe this was used in some sort of ancient ritual. Right? And then at some point, maybe an engineer comes along and rebuilds the thing, and then they test it out and they try it out and they go, oh, no, it was done in this way, and it's a pot holder. It's a pepper mill, or it's a whatever, right? So hands-on work with the object is one of the things that they try to do. And this is why you see so many archaeologists that try to create equivalent objects to the ones that they found in the past. Do we always get it right? Because look at how big the possible affordances are of just this simple object here that we were able to come up with. I'm sure if we had more people, we would have more things up on the board, and I don't even think this is everything that you could think up. If I gave you 10 minutes to, just scribble down as many things with this pencil that you can do. No wrong answers. Well, only wrong answers. So, where does this place us in games? How do we take this information and move it over into games? Yeah. Right. So it allows us to inform better how we look at objects inside of our games. What is the appropriate way to make a controller? That was a huge, big problem for a lot of companies. Now we kind of have standardization in terms of the controller. Yeah, oh man, that was, the N64, I had one, it was a real innovation for what you could do with it, because not only did it have the two wings, where it was the normal-ish controller, but it also had the stick in the middle, and you could play GoldenEye with, and I always had it with the trigger on that, or Star Fox, and you had the little ability to move through it. My hand was more like this than it was like this. You had your hand up. Ah, yes. This becomes a great way to teach players without having to put in a tutorial. Because if you're working off an existing conceptual model that players have, if it's close to a control scheme that they're familiar with, they're more likely to pick up on that game quicker. Have you ever played one game and it's got a control pattern, and then you flip to another game and you find yourself like pressing the button for that? Yeah, mine right now is I play Deep Rock Galactic with my wife, and then I'll play Helldivers alone. And I keep on in Deep Rock Galactic hitting the V button to try to stim myself, and I'm like, this doesn't work. And that's because there's a difference in the control pattern in the scheme. If you go from playing Call of Duty over to Gears of War and back, right? You have to remember, oh wait, I have active reloads, and there's things that I need to do in order to do that inside of Gears of War, where as, oh, press this to there, but it's always quicker to swap to your pistol than to reload, just remember that. So keeping a consistent control scheme. Why is it that it's WASD for movement and then mouse in order to move things, and why is the grenade on the G key? Ease of access? That's the standard. How do we arrive at that standard? A couple of games did it first, and then somebody said, you know what? That works. To the point where some gaming keyboards come with the WSAD in like the fancy other colors now. And they're far more worn down on my keyboard than anywhere else on my one PC. Yes, sir. Oh yeah. No, there's definitely like some sort of like connection between those keys, but also like the G key is maybe not the best key to have that on. E being the use key. Why is E the use key? It's the last letter in use? Easily accessible, yeah. Okay. So on a QWERTY keyboard, these things just kind of make sense, right? Even having your different weapons, like 1, 2, 3, 4 on the top row. Easily accessible, primary on 1, secondary on 2, tertiary on 3, you know, or on the wheel. So all of those decisions were really made by people playing with it. And you can really see this especially if you play older games. If you go back and you play older games, especially from like the early console or Commodore eras, where it's an absolute confusing mess. Has anyone tried one of maybe the old flight simulator games? Where it has the big thing that you have to like tape on top of your keyboard in order to know where everything is. Okay, very unintuitive. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah. And I'll go back to, sometimes inside of my class, I'll sometimes show the IBM keyboard, you know, the old thing for like WordPerfect when they had all that, and that was all bound to the function. That's where your functions are, sir. Didn't you know that? That's what the F stands for in F1, F2, F3. It's function. You're swapping between your functions. So a lot of these old games didn't really have those types of things standardized, set up inside of them. We're luckily coming forward in an era where we understand that there's certain kind of mores, there's certain kind of standards that we're going to go through and utilize. But then the other piece of this is we can subvert those standards. Think about, for example, in Metal Gear Solid, Psycho Mantis. Psycho Mantis. Okay? I think it's an old enough game where I can do a little bit of a spoiler. The big thing about that was he was supposed to be able to mind control you, right? And would invert your keys and do that. So your solution to that was you were to pull it out, your controller, from the first player position and move it over into the second player position, because then he couldn't read your mind. Okay, so this is a way of subverting the norms inside of it. Helldivers does this as well. If you're near the control towers of the Illuminate, it actually messes up your call-ins. There's different sequences and they randomly flip, and that's supposed to represent to the player the feeling of being somehow befuddled or mind confused in regards to it. Okay? That is taking a convention away from you. Another game that does this is Hanabi. Has anybody played the card game Hanabi? Yeah. So in Hanabi, what you're really doing is you're trying to kind of create sets of cards, 1, 2, 3, 4, in colors and proper sequence. But there's this version here. When you pick up cards, where do the cards face? You, right? In every game, pretty much, you pick up cards, you look at them, you see them. That is private information to you. Hanabi is an information game that actually does this backwards. Everyone else can see your card. So you have to hold the cards backwards and show everyone else at the table your cards, and you have to get information from everyone else at the table about what your cards are. Yeah, exactly. So if you've seen Inglourious Bastards where they're making the Guess Who I Am game, right? Same sort of thing. It's hidden information from you. It's utilizing the same affordance. The card is a piece of information inside of the game. It affords you a piece of information. How it is utilized within that game changes. Another place that we see this type of affordance happening again and again, any Euro game. Okay, what are the majority of Euro games? Worker placement. It's cubes. right? You have colored cubes. And the colored cubes represent something within the game. And depending upon how you place those colored cubes, something happens and you get more or less colored cubes. Sometimes the colored cubes are not colored cubes, they're colored little people, like in Carcassonne, right? The meeples. Okay? How many games can you create from that same set? Colored cubes representing the object and then sharing them around. So a lot of items that are inside of these games are completely transferable. It's along the same lines as cards. I'm thinking just the basic 52 pickup deck that everybody has, probably 14. How many different games can be played with that deck? Too many. Whist, poker, solitaire, war, tarot readings. All sorts of stuff can be done with that same set of cards. And in fact, a lot of it came from the fact that they were tarot reading cards that were then turned into gaming cards. Dice. How many games can you play with a pair of dice? Whether just the dice themselves or something else in regards to it. Kevin? So when you look at these objects, you have a lot of space to work with. We have a lot of themes that are inside of it, but we can change that as well. In fact, this is one of the things where I mentioned, for example, a tarot deck. There's one game called Love Letter, which I've seen about 3 different versions of it. The one is basically like historical France. The other one is like a Japanese kind of crazy deck where it comes from originally. I've seen a Batman version of it. Okay, so the theme is separated from the mechanics inside of it. So I want us to have a bit of fun today again. I want us not just to think about fun, I want us to be fun. I want us to roll back into that kind of childhood. Kevin, what's this? There you go. Wrong answers only. Yeah. Would you agree that this could be a magic wand? Would you think of this as a sword, potentially? Could be anything you'd imagine and dream at the time. So we're getting into that sort of standby. So Gavin gave me a budget, and he shouldn't have done that. I immediately ran off to the dollar store, and I got a whole bunch of junk. Not junk. It's junk in my mind, but remember, we're going to be fun. So I've got some stuff here. And for those of you playing along at home, you can just grab some random items as well. I got some fancy stones of different colors. I've got some, if you want to do a Euro game, I've got some cubes. If you don't like land cubes, I've got colored cubes. Okay, so what I want you to do is get into a group. What do you think, 5 and 5? Okay, we'll do 2 groups of 5. Get into groups of 5 for that. And you've got some tools here, some potential pieces that you can, both teams can utilize, maybe take a little bit of everything just to start. Okay. Grab a piece of paper. Designate someone to be the scribe of the group. Grab one of these magic wands. Okay. And we're going to start making a game. Okay. So everybody got a few pieces to work with? Okay. We're going to start making a game. You've got some pieces together. I want you to designate one person to be the scribe. And what's going to happen is this. Starting from the scribe, every one of you in a clockwise fashion is going to begin to declare a rule. Okay? Oh, just grab any old piece of paper, or grab an index card, or I think there was some index cards in there. Yeah. Okay. So you're going to describe a rule for this game that you're creating. Then what I want you to do is, after about 2-3 rules that you create, I want you to play it for a couple of minutes with that rule set that you have. Okay? Then once you've done that for 2-3 minutes playing it, move to the next person and they get to declare the next rule. And that gets added to the list of rules. We're going to continue this process until you think that the game is stupid. Okay? Because this is one of the processes that children use, right? We've seen this before. I'm a cop. Okay, well, I'm a robber. Okay, well, I'm going to shoot you. No, you can't. You can't shoot me. I have body armor, right? We're going to do that with your items. Okay? So start out, have your scribe declare a rule, go 2-3 rules down the line, then start playing the game for a little while, and then have the next person declare a rule. Is that clear? Good with this team? You guys got the process? Good. And for everyone playing at home, we're going to have a little bit of fun, because what happens is, as the number of rules increases, these things start to get crazy. Nope, these are just tools to use. You don't even have to use them. You need some more of anything? Good to start. Okay. You guys need any more?
Whoever has 3 colors at once wins. Because they.
Hi, how you doing? Good. I think there's a little bit of chicken left. Some Timbits and a coffee. Well, fair enough. I was doing my APAR this morning, and now I get to actually have fun. My 3 review is still going slow. That's the one I'm slow on. My APAR I can get done in a fortnight if I just by myself and look at my calendar. But, yeah. The other thing is, I started it and I was good up for the first like 3-4 months of the semester last year, and so I have all of that already in it, because I was trying to do it as I update the CV, update the APAR, update the CV, update, and then it just. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Not easily. Yeah, no problem. It, yeah, no, the whole week. Yeah. The thing I like about this is that you sometimes get the most stupid rules coming out, like, yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, true.
Yeah, I wouldn't think far ahead at all.
Yeah, I want to try.
And I'll just say this, while you can advise whoever holds the rule, while you can advise them, they get final decision. The rule maker has supreme power to make the rule in the end, so they don't have to take advice, they can do whatever they want.
You gotta toss it around in your mouth a little bit.
Hey, just remember that they're going back in the box afterwards. You might have to deal with them later. So, if you're going to do anything with spitting out blocks, just put them to the side after you do so.
Block Tua.
Yeah, I'm laughing.
Colored blocks.
Let's do.
Whose rule is it?
So I was drawing saying my different placement mechanic.
Okay.
So
No, that you have to. Someone else has to come up with the rule. Yeah. Well, it has to go around to the next person to add. If you want to clarify, you have to go to the next person.
I thought they had a different.
No. You gotta. Everybody becomes the lord of the rule and has to add to it.
Prime example is just King's Cup, where
What was it? What was it? The jack with one eye or the one-eyed jack? Yeah. Who's holding the rule power right now? Okay. The problem is that no one actually plays Monopoly how the rules state it is, and they add more rules that lead to infinite money generators that then make the game last forever. Because the whole point, like Monopoly was created by a communist in order to show the failings of capitalism, which meant that you were supposed to be bankrupted out. The other thing is, like for example, if you bankrupt out somebody, you get all their property. It's like the Catholic Church with the popes. They can just take all your lands. Yeah. But then, like even there, where it's like, oh, if you land on free parking, you add $200 to the center, and then if you land on it again, you get the money that's in the pot. Like all of that just extends the game forever. Hasbro did a study, and they found, I think it was like 2/3 of players of Monopoly have never read the rule book. And I use that as my example of read the manual. Yes. For us, it was the rainy day at the cabin game because my wife's grandmother's cabin has the board on the table. They have a table painted with the board, but they never had a full Monopoly set up there. So I got to bring one up. You reminded me, I got to bring one up. Yeah. 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 At the count of 3, all players act at once. So someone counts 3, and then You act. Are you guys testing out the rules in between each? No, test them out. No, every time that you add a rule, play it for a few minutes. Yeah, because then you can get an idea. Is this fun? Does this make sense? If not, is there a rule that corrects it?
I think that like the height is the difficulty.
Then you play it out and you go, oh, this is stupid. Can you add a rule that fixes it? Okay. Okay, so whose turn is it and what rule are you adding?
The rule being added right now is point.
Ah, okay.
Because the first one kind of incentivizes to go up.
Ah. If there isn't a rule, then that means you can do it from wherever you want, right? You found an exploit. That's fine. Whose turn is it to make a rule? Okay. You should do one like everybody with glasses gets 3 extra points. There's nothing stopping you. Hmm? Yeah, if you want. Pencil. That'd probably be best because then you just erase it afterwards if you wanna use them again. I don't mind. They're from the dollar store. I can grab more if we need to. Hmm. Beth saw those ones in the dollar store. She's like, get those because then they can make their own dice. And I said, oh yeah, maybe they will. And sure enough. This has kind of got an interesting theming to it too, eh? Because it kind of looks like you're building up like almost a flower as it goes, right? Like you've got the stem up to a flower on top. Who's got the rule stick? Ooh.
Yeah. 4 points. Flowers count themselves when they play.
Is that a rule? Okay. Okay, take 10 more minutes with this. So take 10 more minutes of this process. Okay?
I don't like other flowers.
Okay, so you're coming into an issue of accessibility of the players, right? So is that something that you have to worry about in the rules?
There's no disabled kids, sorry.
Was that in your general direction?
It went over his leg.
Okay.
It was, but.
Maybe you need a rule that says don't fling it at the person roughly. Softly, guys. Yes. The difference between softball and slow pitch and fastballs, right?
Funny if you just walk off all three, you're like, no, build tall.
I mean, you could add a rule in that says that you're not allowed a 1 height or a 0 height flower.
That's true.
Oh.
You biffed it. 5 for 6 as well?
Is there something that says that you return that flower back to the pot, or does it stay on the board where it landed?
Everything's pulled away.
Okay. Is that a rule? You're not following the process, guys. Okay. Then you should have a rule that states that. Ooh.
Double counts the block total. Everything. Here's that's the list.
Okay, 5 more minutes, guys. Five-minute warning. What happens if it all falls over?
You lose all those points.
The person who was
Oh,
so 2 points
okay.
for flowers.
No, but I mean, like, what if you knock over the whole thing like Jenga? Oh, okay. I see. Okay, 1 minute. Well, this is the same stuff I'm going to be bringing to the SHAD program for them to do demos. Yeah. I've done this before. It's actually a really good like camp game that you could probably even use with your scouts too. If everybody adds a rule onto the thing, and then it just gets into this huge, big, giant mess. I originally kind of thought about it like from that perspective. Oh yeah, like all systems, right? You're just always patching the previous thing, and then it gets more and more complicated, and yeah. Especially like sometimes you'll get two people in the group and they go like, yeah, nobody with a red jacket's allowed to, you know, do this or whatever, and then they get their turn and they'll be like, ah, and then it goes back and forth, and somebody's like, well, you get that, and then I've had them come up to me and be like an appeal, and I said, well, then make a rule that says, you know, yeah, and then eliminate you can eliminate previous ones via repealing previous rules. Yeah. Yeah. No, I've written actually a whole paper on this process alone, on how, what comes up inside of it and what works. So. But I think this is the team that I think they've both existed the longest without completely breaking the game. Okay, I'm going to ask everybody just to pause. Okay, how many rules are we up to over here? 13, and we got 10 rules over here. 3 of them are like double rules. Okay, so I want you to reflect on what we just went through as a process. As designers now, I want you to think about this. What was your process for coming up with those rules? Why did you make the rules that you made? What was getting in the way of fun? So as you're making these rules, what decisions were you making that were trying to increase the fun of your game that you're creating? And we talked earlier today about the 8 kinds of fun. So if you want to put it in the framework of that and score it in terms of those, like which ones were you highlighting, which ones were you excluding, use that. So hence why fun's in quotations. So however you define fun, come up with that. What rules did you forget? And I think I saw both teams go through this process where somebody was like, but you're not allowed to do that. There's no rule. Right? We had that. What were those rules? What was forgotten when you actually went to play the game? And that's one of the reasons why playing the game is so important between these stages. Because that's where you're going to find the ones that you didn't write down, that you just assumed everyone knew, right? Okay, so think about those 3 questions. If you need some index cards or something like that, write down your answers or have your answers together. And of course, Gavin is not listening to instructions. You know what I asked you guys to do? What was your process for coming up with the rules? What was getting in the way of fun? And we can use the 8 types of fun if you want. And what rules did you forget? That is, what assumptions did you make during the rules making process where somebody went, but you're not allowed to do that, and then somebody else went, well, there's no rule. Yeah, what was missed? Okay. Okay. So can I grab one person from both teams to act as the speaker on behalf of that team? And what I'd like you to do is first describe what your game is and what the rules were, and then answer those 3 questions. Well, probably best for the online thing. They're probably bored. Okay? You want to go first, Gavin?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Sweet. I'll yell.
Okay.
So yeah, we made a game. It was called Flora. 2 O's though, because floor. Essentially, the objective of the game: stack cubes. The longer you made the stock, you got more points. And then when you put the flower on the top of the stock, you got more. Special, like goofy gimmick. There was the main process for ad hoc making rules as they came out. Like for the missed section, lots of it was missed because we sort of just made up rules as we needed to, right? So it's like, oh, color cubes. Fundamentally, if you got color cubes, are going to want to do different things, right? So then we made up the rules for each cube as we drew them. Same with like the flowers and the capstone, what happened when things fell, and all that stuff. And then as far as what got in the way of the fun, we were a little too generous with the size of our base, and it allowed for players to sort of avoid interaction too much. So then we went back, figured out what the issue was, and then we changed our rules as well. So slightly different than Myst because we had a rule, but it was just too generous. We just narrowed it down.
Okay. Great.
Our game was essentially based around throwing blocks at each other. We each started with 3 of the uncolored wood blocks, and the goal was to get 3 different colors of the color blocks. At the count of 3, we all picked somebody else in the group and threw a block at them. If we caught it, we kept that block, otherwise it returned to the person who threw it. Our first time around this circle, we was just deciding the structure of the game, basically. And past that, we quickly started finding things we forgot, like we did not define what counted as a catch, for instance. And so after that, most of our rules ended up being a catch is when you actually get it with your bombs, or the person who does the countdown is whoever rolls the highest of a set of die. Like figuring out how to actually, define the structure of the game. As far as what got in the way of fun was, I think, other than just the little exploits where we failed to account for people, they would have been cheating if we had thought to make a rule for it. One of the things was that it turned out to be very difficult to throw and catch at the same time, which we probably should have figured something out that, but we didn't have that. So,
It's a very complicated game at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I said if the game gets to the point where it's just silly, start afresh, start a new page of rules. Now, I heard some complaints about this process, but I think there was also a statement that made sense. Oh, well, we all want to work together and create the rules, but everybody gets their chance to add one, but that's part of the process, right? And so part of this is also kind of looking at if you're designing afresh, if you're designing anew, then great, you can come up with all the rules so that they guard against all of this. But what happens if you already have a pre-existing rule set and you need to add these things in, like patches? Look at a lot of our society. How do we come up with laws inside of our society? There ought to be a rule that says you're not allowed to X. And then we go down 3-4 years, we play the game that exists within our society. And then we forget about all of those forgotten pieces, right? The forgotten, oh, but what if this happens? Or, oh, what if this, I heard this team talk about, well, what if you have, movement issues? What if you can't do that thing? Is there something to allow for that? Or catching and throwing at the same time is hard. Could we put a rule in to make that easier? Or will that remove the purpose of the game? And yeah, I wanted you guys to go through this whole process one by one, adding in these rules to kind of see, in a way, how silly that is in a way, right? To come up with this. So there is a need for more of a refined structure and process. And also a big part of that is trying to figure out what are you going to forget about before you have to do it. And this is where the bugs come in. And I think even now when you see like board games, all the time you go onto like Board Game Geek and there's errata, right? What if in this really situational thing, what is the outcome of it, right? Oh yeah, and I mean those situations rarely happen, but sometimes you get into a point where there is no rule for this. And how do you go about it? Hasbro did a study, especially on Monopoly. Monopoly is simultaneously probably one of the best and worst games in the world. And I'll define what I mean by that. Monopoly is probably the game that everyone owns. Yes. Yeah, but you're weird, Gavin. Yeah, I'm just saying, Hasbro sold a lot of that game. It's a commercial success. Right? Everyone has that. So from that perspective, if you just went by sales, Monopoly is a really, really good game as a consumer object. Conversely, there is essay after essay after essay about Monopoly is a terrible game from the player. People get kicked out and don't get to play through the rest of it, or it never ends until someone tips over the table. Why was Monopoly originally created? Does anyone know?
Didn't that one guy make it to show the perils of capitalism?
It was a woman, but yes, it was made in order to show the perils of capitalism. It was a communist, like, you know how they have Communopoly now? The original Monopoly was a communist propaganda piece in order to show the horrors of capitalism by the fact that via this landlord you could like extract rent. And look at what is the best strategy in Monopoly? Does anyone know? Buy everything, put hotels on it, and then go to jail.
Never move.
Going to jail in Monopoly is a benefit. The get out of jail, huh?
You never have to move out of the borders because you never pay other people.
You don't have to pay other people, right? Movement at the start of the game is good. You're getting capital up, you're getting generators, you're putting together that thing. Movement at the end of the game is the most worst thing you can do because almost everything now costs you money unless you land on your own properties. The only time, the majority of the time when you make money in Monopoly is on someone else's turn. So your solution to that is, and the $200 is not enough at the end of the game in order to make up for the high rents on those hotels. So your best option is buy a whole bunch of property, put 4 houses on it, not even a hotel, 4 houses, because there's things that down your hotels and mess them up more than there is your houses, and property taxes go up. So four houses, then go to jail. It's really pretty much the Trump idea, right? Get a whole bunch of hotels, extract rent, get convicted of a whole bunch of felonies. So he was trying that. Okay, so another reason, why does Monopoly suck? Everybody makes up rules. And what rules do we do?
Cash pot in the middle of the table thing?
Cash pot in the middle of the table is probably the biggest home-boiled rule that there is. Hasbro did a study, they went out. 2/3 of Monopoly players have never read the rulebook. Okay? You guys are all computer scientists. How many people have read the manual? Yeah, you guys are weird. Okay. You guys have done tech support. How many people read the manual before they call you? None. Yeah, none. Nobody reads the manual, right? This is the one thing that I've learned, especially now going through and doing like house repairs and plugging stuff in and doing that. I read the manual. I'm like the weird guy. I'm probably better than some of the licensed electricians because I actually read the manual on the thing on how to hook the thing up. Okay? We all think we can just avoid the manual. Monopoly has all sorts of things that make the game go quickly. If you bankrupt someone, did you know that you get all of their mortgage properties? You basically steal all of their wealth and take that over for yourself. That makes the game go a whole lot faster. If you land on a property and you do not have the cash to buy it, it goes up for auction amongst all the players. That's to get the properties out into the field as quickly as possible. That speeds up the game. Okay? So a lot of those systems are built into Monopoly in order to keep the game fast. And what do we do? Oh, well, you're knocked out of the game. All your properties go back to the bank. That's not the rule. Oh, you land on that property, you can't buy it, we'll have to go around again. No, it goes to an auction, you should do that. Oh, you landed on free parking, you get all of the taxes and fines and everything back into the thing. No, the game is meant to extract money out of the players as quickly as possible. That shortens the game, that sends someone to bankruptcy quicker. So all of these stories of, I played Monopoly with my grandmother and it took 5 days. Right there, that tells me you are not playing Monopoly correctly. You're not playing in accordance with the rules. Going back to our idea earlier, what did we afford? They're not playing Monopoly. They're playing some other game with the pieces that are from Monopoly and then complaining, well, Monopoly is a terrible game. Because they're not playing it in accordance with the rules of the game. So it will last forever. One of the things when we're working with video games is the fact that the rules are pretty much set. Right? If we want to change the rules in a video game, we have to go in and we have to patch the code. We have to change it. That really changes the way that we can work with this. But then take a game like D&D. Anything can be attempted in D&D, right? I mean, there's some rules, but what's rule 0 inside of D&D and pretty much every other game of that genre, of a tabletop RPG? Yeah, rule 0, GM is God, right? Or that's how I would phrase it, but you can phrase it however you wish. The game master is God. They have.
Oh, the game master. Okay.
Yeah, that's rules. Rule 0 is the game master can throw away the entire rule book and just say, this happens. Okay. Right? Narrative declarations can happen inside of it. Okay, how many times have you seen a game master go, well, you should be dead, but. Why do they do that? The rules say you should be dead. Was it getting in the way of?
Yes.
Fun. Right? That gets in the way of fun. Does anyone want to have that tabletop RPG experience where the DM goes, you're dead, out of the game? Okay, maybe you're playing one where it's just, okay, now I roll another character. Okay? But is it narratively more interesting if you survive just on the edge of life and now your party has to go and like do another quest in order to like resurrect you or something? That might be more narratively interesting. Or maybe you're left with some sort of hideous deformity that plays throughout the game and then you have to figure out some way to get rid of that. So there's more interesting places that we can take the narrative. There's more interesting places that we can take the fun. There's one game that I really like from the standpoint of narrative. It's called Hillfolk. And it really is an absolutely terrible name for that system because the system has to do with like tribes on tops of hills But the system itself has to do more with narrative declaration. It's really a storytelling game more than it is a role to have a mechanic occur game. And one of the rules in that game is no one can die unless everyone agrees. So if you have a player character and not everybody in the table raises their hand to say that this happens, that character cannot die. They have plot armor. The way this game works is closer to a writer's room of like a television show. Think like Game of Thrones or something like that, right? You know, J.R.R. Martin's putting up his hand all the time. Kill him off! Okay, but think about like Breaking Bad or something like that. At the start, all of you begin, your character creation is really writers coming up with what are we going to do? So let's take, for example, Game of Thrones. Okay, let's start with a character inside of Game of Thrones. Any character inside of Game of Thrones? Ned Stark. Okay, you're going to play Ned Stark for the purposes of this. And, you know, give me an attribute of Ned Stark. Honorable. Ned Stark is honorable. Now I'm going to go over to Gavin. And Gavin is going to play Jon Snow. And you have to say, what is your relation to Ned Stark? Yeah, like the bastard son of, you know, of Ned Stark, okay? So now it's created a narrative declaration as to what that is. So now you have a built-in relationship inside of the game. And then we have someone else, and you're gonna say, I'm gonna be, you know, Tyrion Lannister. Okay, what's your relation to these guys? Okay, fair enough. You're Tyrion Lannister. You're part of the Lannisters, which is a house that opposes the Starks. Okay, so now we've set up some amount of conflict between that. Okay, then we'll go and say, okay, you're Jaime Lannister. You're the brother of this guy, and you know you're kind of protective of him because he's a dwarf, and you want to like keep him around. So you create this whole sort of narrative network as the first step of character creation. So, do we use any statistics now? No. Do we know what our characters basically are, how they relate to one another, what their general properties and etc. would be? Okay, so now what we're going to have is more of a narrative game. And so you go to each of the players and you say, what would you like to do today? And then people go and they say, well, I want a scene inside of our television show in which Jaime Lannister confronts Ned Stark and, you know, accuses him of some impropriety. Okay? And then we go around the table. Who's in favor of this? And you get basically story chits that say, I'm in favor, I'm not in favor. And if there's enough in favor to out of favor, then that scene happens. And you play out and go through that. But the scene is kind of set beforehand. You just have to play out the story that happens there. Then we go to the next scene. And in the next scene, you know, at the end of the scene, you're in the dungeon, etc. And then another person comes along and they're going to try to rescue you from the dungeon. Does that happen? Does that not happen? Okay, and you can use your narrative pushes as writers inside of this story. So that's more of a collaborative storytelling technique than it is really a role-playing game. So it's kind of an interesting take on the same sort of narrative process, on trying to come up with the same sort of thing as a D&D campaign. Can you go and slay dragons and take over computer systems and be vampires and werewolves and etc. inside of the system? Yes. But it's what are you focusing on? And I think that even goes back into what is fun. But the rule set is completely different. How you cause things to happen is very different because you have to convince all the other writers inside of the writer's room. And it becomes more narrative contrivance. So in D&D, killing off a player character could happen really easily. There's games like Shadowrun, etc. Oh, player death is just a fact of life, right? There's one that I love also called Paranoia. And you start with a 6-pack of clones. Because part of it is you're trying to figure out if everybody else is a traitor and you're troubleshooters, and trouble tends to shoot you. And so a clone is just dispatched with the same memories as the previous person because they know you're going to die in that game. So there's a narrative contrivance that allows for that. There's a mechanical contrivance that says player death is easy, simple, and happens frequently. Okay? We see games where that is the case, where you get a certain six-pack of characters that you can throw into that. There's other ones where they're far more narratively focused, and player death is a big, huge thing. So what experience do you want to put to your players? What experience do you want them to have? That formulates inside of the rules, and it goes back into what is your fun. And the other thing is, what rules are you forgetting about inside of that? How do we have a stopgap feature that prevents exploitation? Okay. Has anybody ever watched The Spiffing Brit?
Yeah.
I love The Spiffing Brit. Things like, oh, it's perfectly balanced. Watch me get infinite money, or watch me get infinite power, or watch me, you know, we're going to go into like this game and take this little tiny island nation and, you know, corner the market on tea. Things like that. But it shows that those mechanics, and a lot of the mechanics inside of that, can be highly exploited inside of those video games. Because that's not the way that they're expecting someone will play through the rules. That's not how they think someone will want to play the game. And so when there's certain power buffs or whatever, if someone's playing the normal strategy, that might be balanced. But in this very particular, strange way, which I will show you today, it will end up breaking the game to the point where it's completely unbalanced and you're able to take over the entire thing. And those are very interesting points to me, is it always breaks along the edges where there's some sort of balance issues. So look at, what rules did you forget? Rules never survive contact with players. So the other thing that I hope you guys can take away from this, and maybe you saw, because you guys weren't play testing right away, right? You were just coming up with a whole list of rules, and I said, are you trying them out? And you went, nope. And I said, but what if you do? Right? Play testing is where you're going to see that. Play testing is where you're going to see it break. Play testing is where you're going to go, oh man, we forgot about the. Okay? And try to also play it in as many extreme ways as you can. Try to come up with player personas that are extremes. So come up with a strategy that is an extreme strategy. So in your game here, I might try to just place flowers. Maybe that's my strategy. And I'm just going to try a game where I just place flowers. Does that break your game? How do you know? Yeah, a couple of you were trying that, right? Yeah, yeah. And then you had to fix it again, right? So that's the thing there. Again, what could you guys have done to like break the game?
One thing we realized we had, towards the end, we had no compulsion to actually throw for a second. So
Yeah. So you had to add something to force that compulsion to be a rule that made that happen. Baseball, great example of that same thing, right? Why did they add a shot clock or a pitch clock into baseball? Why did they add a shot clock into basketball? You know what? I'm up.
So one team doesn't outweigh the other forfeit.
I'm up 30 points. I'm just going to dribble the ball and run around and keep the ball away. Right? So that created the shot clock. That created that rule. Baseball. We're up, 9-0. We've got 3 innings left. They're looking tired. Or we're feeling tired. So let's, time. Let me tap my shoes, scratch myself, take another piece of gum. Up I go. Oh, time. Tap my shoes. Okay? Next thing you know, baseball games last 5 million hours. Now they're only down to 500 hours. Okay? But that's the reason why that was put in. That's the reason why certain changes were made in terms of this. Let's pull the goaltender. What does the goaltender do? Puts his stick down on the ice in front of the net. Bye, guys. Okay, that was a real rule that had to be established because there was no rule about what do you do when the goalie lays his stick across the front of the goal and skates off. There was no rule. Now there is. That goaltender just piled up a whole bunch of snow in front of the goal line to slow it down before he skated off. Used to be no rule, now there is. That goaltender is actually carrying the puck over to the past the red line and is shooting on the net. That wasn't a rule. Now it is. Even there, if you guys aren't familiar with like some of the history of hockey, I'm going to use hockey because that's a sport that I know. I'm Canadian. I'm sorry. That's two jokes inside of that. If you didn't catch it, I'm sorry. Okay. It used to be that you could only toe save if you were a goaltender. Remember toe saving? So toe saving is you've got your pads. The goaltender has to remain upright. Okay? Today's NHL, this is not the case. This is no longer the rule that's in place. So the goaltenders would actually toe save. They would basically use their toes. And then a goaltender went, it says that I'm not allowed to intentionally go down. Oh no, I tripped. Oh no, I tripped again. Oh no, and so they created this style in which they would just slide back and forth in the ice looking as if they were, basically losing an edge in their skate. And then this was completely messed up because there was this guy called Dominik Hasek, who was probably one of the most innovative and greatest Czech goaltenders of all time. Anyone know Dominik Hasek? Okay. Few things about Dominik Hasek. One, he pretty much had the big, huge, like old 18-year-old cage. He played with that. He didn't play with a normal, what was then the normal goaltender's helmet. He played with a big, huge cage over him. The reason for that was he would go down on the ice. He had a style which they called butterfly, which is now pretty much what you see. Every goaltender is like this, right? That's Hasek did that originally. And he would butterfly. Okay? You can kind of maybe see what I mean by that now. Okay? And so he would go down in between, knees out like that, and then he could like cover the entire bottom of the net and still have his blocker hand and his glove up to guard the top corners. But the thing is that made him lower in the net. Because he's lower in the net, he had a big, huge cage on him. So if you watch old Dominik Hasek thing, you're like, what's with that weird helmet he's wearing? And that's because he had to move to his knees to do that, and the helmets were not designed for that at the time. And so he wore like the old kind of like big, huge, heavy face mask hockey thing instead of that. Even goaltenders' masks are rare. This is one of the reasons why goaltenders didn't wear masks. And we're like, why didn't they wear masks? They're getting hit in the head with pucks all the time. Well, the reason why they're getting hit in the head with pucks all the time now is because they all play butterfly. When you're in the toe save era, your head is above the goal, the top of the crossbar. You're like every other player. So do you need a mask? If they're shooting here inaccurate, not really.
And also, would players not be able to shoot up high?
That was the other piece of this, right? So the sticks were also primarily wood, which didn't have as much of a bend, so you couldn't lift the puck the way that they can today. So there's a whole lot of things that happened through that. So technology led to shifts in the way that that happened and had to also lead to rules. So goaltenders can only toe save was turned to, oops, I tripped, was turned to Dominik Hasek inventing butterfly. Because as soon as they removed the rule that says, no, goaltenders can go down on the ice, stop this goofiness of like pretending that you're tripping all the time, we know what you're doing. Hasek was like, well, why am I doing this if I can just do this? And then I still have all of this. So it led to innovation within the sport when the rules changed. We're kind of seeing the same sort of differences now with like the removal of the trapezoid in the back, right? The goaltender can't go out. Well, that's Patrick Waugh going out to the corners, whipping it halfway across the ice. Same thing is happening right now in basketball, right? There's this whole, everything is now a three-pointer, right? I'm not from that era. You know, there's scores now inside of basketball in the 140s, 150s, 160s. And, you know, when I grew up to the Raptors, if they got above 90, that was a good night. That was an amazing night. Yeah. Yeah, so would Michael Jordan be a good basketball player today? Yeah. Because the triangle defense was at the time like the most innovative thing ever, and now it's like, wouldn't work with how they play today. Yeah, and so a lot of technology has changed that, a lot of it has edited what happens, and I'm sure in every other sport this is pretty much the case as well. So why don't we take a break for 10 minutes, because I think everybody's kind of, I can see it, everybody's like, oh, God damn, Dr. Brown, stop talking. Okay, let's take 10 minutes, and at the bottom of the hour, we'll come back and do another activity.
Did you see my message about
So welcome back. So I want to talk about something different for the last bit that we have here. So we're going to take a look into procedural content generation. Ooh, okay. How many of you have heard of the term procedural content generation? Yeah, probably everybody. You probably heard me give some sort of speech and spiel upon it at length, you know, how great it is, how we should all be doing it. You can take...
We should all enroll in this class.
Huh?
How we should all enroll in the class.
You should definitely enroll in my class. It's right now a special topic, 4980. It's section 2, so if... Huh?
What are the requirements?
I think it's third year enrollment.
I'm only entering a second.
Ah, shucks. Okay, did you take Comp 10 or 1810? Game development?
No.
That's what you should enroll in.
Does this require that?
No.
No.
But there's a course on game development, 1810, that you should enroll in if you haven't done it already. There's still slots in both of them, by the way. There's slots available in game development. I couldn't believe it. I'm usually 100% waitlisted in that plus. In fact, they raised the cap up to 60 people, so that's... Okay, so procedural content generation. Since you're all experts at it, what is it?
Putting a seed into an algorithm to give you different results depending on the input.
Give you different results depending on the input. Via a seed, okay? That's a very mechanical way of looking at it. It's not a wrong way of looking. I said it's a mechanical way. Yeah.
A way of allowing the game to assemble content as the game is
A game assembling content. Okay. Anyone else have an idea of this in a definition? Generation of random maps, lands. Okay. Levels, objects. What makes it good? Every player has a unique experience. That might be an evaluation.
huge amount of content versus the amount of action.
Okay, you got a huge amount of content and the developer had to put in very little work. Okay, increases mechanics, yeah. Replayability. Any detriments to this? Yes, okay. So I think you're getting into what my thinking is, and I'm trying to avoid No Man's Skies. Okay? Okay, No Man's Sky, when I first started kind of teaching evolutionary computation and procedural content generation, I didn't have a touchstone for what bad PCG is. I would have to go, you know those quest generation algorithms where they like generate the same quest like 40 billion times? It's like, that's just World of Warcraft. You know, that's just, but the No Man's Sky, if at that time, the big show on TV was the Colbert Report on Comedy Central. It came on pretty much after Jon Stewart, The Daily Show, and Colbert would come on and do that after. He's now on like the major networks doing the whole thing. But at the time he had his own show, and he was kind of like playing up as being like the conservative commentator, pro-America, Eagle, was it Rock, Flag, and Eagle? Like that sort of level of like everything America grand and etc. And he had on the creators of No Man's Sky. And they said, we've named a planet after you inside of our universe, and look at our universe is like almost infinite, and you can create all of these worlds and go to them, and there's a weird monster, and you can name that planet and name that monster. Everybody's like, oh wow, look at this, it's creating this infinite world. The problem is, space, if anyone has ever read Douglas Adams, is big. How big? Enormously big. Think of the biggest thing that you can think of, and then think of something that's even larger than that. And that's what they were creating. Go back to your 8 types of fun. What type of fun was this giving you? Discovery, right? The ability to go out and find your own place and name your own thing. But what were they not thinking of? How we fill that space, right? So they created this big thing with all these worlds with, various monsters on it, spore level monsters that were on side of it. But they didn't think about what is the interaction between players. And so early No Man's Sky, there really wasn't a game. You could fly your spaceship around, you could go to different planets, you could name them, you could call that the Heffalump, and this is the planet, Joey Land or whatever, and the whole thing, and do that, and go off to the next planet and name it, and call that a thing, right? Okay, that's maybe discovery, but it's really just a walking simulator where you get to call the things things. Okay? It's basically Garden the Eden, the game, where you get to go through and name all the animals. Okay? And maybe that's a better game because then there's more things closer together. But you also have to travel between all these places in space. It's really big. And they found that if you took their original plans for this game and had 2 players inside of it, the probability of those 2 players ever bumping into each other was infinitesimally small. You would never meet another player in your entire time playing that game. But here's the thing, I want you to come to my planet that I found. I want you to see the Heffalump and etc. And there was no mechanism in which someone could go to that. So really what they did is they created a generator that could create lots of things. First of all, none of it was all that much different and good. And second of all, there was no purpose for that generation. Now today I've heard that No Man's Sky, via iterations and everything, it's turned more into kind of like a Subnautica kind of game where you have like actual missions and goals and you can pilot your ship around, etc. And everybody keeps on telling me, No Man's Sky is much better. Okay, I don't care. I don't care because I'm looking at the procedural content generation of it, and really this was kind of sold as a bill of goods. It was sold as procedural content generation in a game is going to create these vast, huge universes. And the scary part is it had already been created before. Yeah. Minecraft uses procedural content, but even go before that, there was a game called Elite. And you might have also heard of Elite Dangerous, etc. Guess what it also created? A large universe in which you had different planets that you could go to that were randomly, procedurally content generated, that had economies and all these types of things. So a lot of the stuff that was built by these creators of No Man's Sky existed as a technology and was actually utilized in such a better way because the game was the target. It wasn't just, we have a tech demo that we're going to sell on this television show. And this is the big thing that I want you guys to think about when you're utilizing any tool, not just procedural content generation, but any tool presently. Why are you using this tool? What is it affording you? What is it giving you? What does it add to the experience? Because the only thing that's worse than bad content is a lot of random bad content. And so looking at where do you put in those types of generators and spending your time on coming up with what is the purpose for it. Why does it exist? Why is it necessary to exist within this game? What is it giving me inside of that world? And how do I evaluate whether it's doing what I want it to do? Now there's a few ways that we can get to an evaluation. The first way is, hey, take a look at this. Does it look good? Right? Play testing, going back and examining it. The other piece of this, and I'm sad that Gavin isn't here because he always runs out when I say this word. He'll scream. It's like the Wicked Witch of the West. If you pour water on Gavin when I say this word, statistics. Oh no, not statistics. Okay? How many of you have taken a class in statistics up till now? I'm seeing one hand.
50 counts?
Sure, for the purposes of this, you've taken it. Yeah, okay.
I don't want to take 2,000.
Okay. The big thing, and I will just tell you right now, hypothesis testing. That's the biggest thing, right? Is this objectively better? Or understanding of randomness or understanding doesn't meet with this sort of thing. So part of it is trying to quantify via an evaluation, how good is this piece of content? Is there some way that we can measure the goodness? Now for certain things, maybe this is really easy. If I'm creating a level, I could probably get the quickest path through the level. I could use A star, right? Anytime that we use AI inside of games, when they say, we have the most advanced AI in the world, it's a version of A star. Okay, so that allows us to do pathfinding inside of our level. Okay, so now I can quantify things. I could have longest path, shortest path, path between 2 points. How quickly is this done? Are those statistics that I can probably use in order to say, is this level fit to task? Is that something I can quantify inside of my game? Maybe it is. If I was doing level generation, maybe longest path or number of cul-de-sacs where I branch off, maybe those are controls that I can put on my generator. Go back to Aristotle. If we have a thing, make measurable that which is not presently measured. If we can measure that thing, then we can put some statistics against it, and hopefully by transforming those statistics and telling our generator fit to this purpose, we can end up with that, this similar item. Okay? If we look at art, how do we evaluate art? By looking at it. Okay, so maybe that's something that we need human-in-the-loop evaluation upon. Or maybe this is just, is it within the color palette of my world? Okay, so there's certain things where maybe we're just trying to make sure that it fits with the color palette that we're aiming for. Maybe we're looking for something that generally looks like a pre-existing image. That's something that I can use statistics against. So anytime that you can, try to put a quantification against it, even if it isn't the best, even if it just approximates, try to come up with a quantification, because that will allow you to put that statistic into your generator and force it to conform to that. Another way, I did a whole series of stuff on camouflage generation. What is a good camouflage? Blends in with the environment, has the same colors as the environment, disrupts the ability for someone to see you on that background. One way that I can do that, I can go to a human and I can say, human, look at the thing. But there's also this wonderful field, it's called computer vision. So if we come up with how do humans see camouflage or not see camouflage, it has to do with disruption of the outline. The biggest thing that we see is the outline of someone inside of the background. If I put you in a completely black suit and put you out into a forest, you're going to be really easy to be seen because there's this big black splotch there in the shape of a human. And my brain is going to go, human! Okay? Even if I put you in a sufficiently green, not bright day-glow orange green kind of thing, but like, you know, camouflage green, and you are still camouflage green and you're in front of a forest, you're probably going to see outline of a human. So what do camouflages primarily do? They have splotches of different sizes because they're trying to
Create outlines on you.
no, break up your outline.
No, I mean like make outlines on you.
Yes.
Different colors.
Yes, that will break up your outline. So you're trying to blend in with the thing because leaves and all of that have like leafy shapes, and the shadows, even we can see here on the floor how the shadows are kind of layered on top of each other and etc., right? Animals already know how to do this to a certain extent too. If you look at the camouflages that, you know, cats, big cats and all of that, why are they striped in those ways? Why is it always that their belly is lighter than the top of them? Because the top of them is going to get the sun, the bottom is not. So you lighten the bottom, you darken the top, and this is why pretty much all animals have a light patch along their belly, which is closer to the ground, because they're trying to make up for the fact that the shadow is going to darken it. They're trying to stay one consistent color throughout. So look at what happens inside of nature and how we work with that. So our idea there was, okay, well, let's create a tin eye. Let's create a computer vision that looks at this image in the way that a human would be looking at it. And then use that as a surrogate for the evaluation that a human would make. Sadly, I don't have something like, how beautiful is a painting? I can break up an outline inside of a camouflage. Or there's been certain things on like rules of thirds. Does it conform to the rule of thirds? That might be something where you could do that with a computer vision process. So at least you know that it has those properties. So again, why are you using procedural content generation? The biggest value that I see is not that you're going to spend a lot less time working on the generator. The generator's going to take you a lot more time. So your original issue there of, I can make a lot of stuff with a small team. Yeah. But do it for things where you're going to have to make 1,400 of them. Right? So this is kind of getting back into the idea of mass production and tack time and all of that. If you are trying to make a game where you're creating, say, like Megaton inside of Fallout 3 or some sort of like hub world area where everything should be in its proper place and its narrative importance to have these things where they are, throw away procedural content generation. Don't use it. Don't use it. It's not the right tool. Right? To the man with a hammer, everything is a nail. PCG is a hammer. It's a big, blunt, heavy hammer.
It's a lot better for when you're okay with stuff being random.
Yeah. Okay, if I wanted to say have a star field or something that's constantly changing. If I want to maybe say have 100,000 goblins all with different like loadouts and characters and bags on them, yeah, that's great. If I want to have enemies come in front of me and I want their names to be different, okay? Maybe I'm making like a beat-em-up game, right? Like a Double Dragon, and I want the one to be Chuck, and I want the other one to be Jones, and I want this one to be Chuck Jones, or something like that, right? Have something there that maybe I have a list of names and it just pulls those names out. If I'm doing Roller Coaster Tycoon, I'm naming every guest inside of that. Maybe there's just a list of names and it grabs one from this list and it grabs one from this list, it glues them together, there you go. Or the colors of their t-shirts and the pants and all of that, and they come out random all the time. Or how much money they have in their pocket. Those are places where procedural content generation makes a lot of sense and where games have utilized it. So this isn't a panacea. This isn't something where, oh, I just need a lot of content, let me just immediately call to a generator. What is your generator being used to create? Why is it inside of your game? What does it lead with narratively? How does it work into the world? And another big part of this is, how does it make the game realistic, believable? Now, when I say that, when I say realistic and believable, depends on the universe in which you live. Right? If you're living inside of a technologically advanced civilization, right, it randomly putting out various magical items is probably not what you mean by this. Okay? There's purpose in how things are arranged. Even the items inside of this room, look at the rows inside of it. This has been purposefully arranged in this way. It hasn't been haphazardly laid out. Okay? Could a generator rebuild this room? Yeah, it's got a few different repeating elements inside of it. Maybe I could have some modules that have a few different elements and I'm rotating them through and I create that kind of like a tile laying program. Go ahead.
As long as there aren't too many rules that you have to implement.
Right, but part of it is also ensuring that the rules are believable to the universe in which you live.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you another example. Town creation. We want to make a small, Victorian, medieval-looking town. Okay, lots of little houses that we're going to put inside of it. Where does the church go inside of a town? Next to the graveyard. Yeah, okay. I would agree with that. I would say that the graveyard goes next to the church, but. The edge of town, are you sure?
Oh, the graveyard at the edge of town, but realistically, it'd be close enough to residential area. Depends how much the city has grown over time.
Yeah. But during, I said the medieval or Victorian era, where's the church in a small hamlet or town? Top of the hill, usually high up, usually close to the town center square, because the society revolves around that, right? That's an important piece inside of it. So normally that front, center, and square there, or it could be, you know, the municipal building, right? Where do we put the town hall?
Beside the church.
Beside the church nearby, right? Because we're going to have meetings there. Everybody can just file over from one to the other. Where do we put the sheriff's office? Where do we put the sheriff's office? Where do we put the brothel? Probably away, right? Probably far away. Where do we put the saloon, right? Okay, so think about how that's organized inside of our world and what are the requirements for that? How do we create this? Where do we put towns? Why? We need it to live, right? We need water to live. If you look at where are big, huge cities, where are the most populous cities in the world? Huh? Coastal? Near water? Right? London is on the Thames. Paris is on the Seine. Moscow is on side of the Toronto's by the way. Right? Vancouver. Okay? Quebec City. Yes, Montreal is right in the thing. Okay? Pretty much everywhere you go in the world that has a large population city, it's always off of a river or on the sea. That has to do with transportation during that era. In order to move goods, it's far cheaper to move goods via it. It has to do with sanitation. It has to do with supplies of water. What are the few exceptions? Large cities not near water. Anybody got an idea? Las Vegas. Las Vegas is one of the most populous cities that's not near a body of water. And why do we have that? Because mafia gambling. Right? They've got enough money that they can just bring water there. Okay, so that allows us to violate it, and it's only since we've been able to just make water appear wherever we wish it to be via pipelines and all this, that we're able to violate that highly clear rule. Okay, going back to your statement about the graveyard is beside the church. Why is the graveyard beside the church? Sacred ground in order to like move the congregation over, etc., right? Seat of the town. So now you come across inside of your game, you come across a city in which the graveyard is on the outskirts of the town, but the church is still in the middle. What does that say? That might be the case. yeah. So if I was living in a world in which ghouls and vampires existed, where would I want to bury my dead? Far away. Where would I put my graveyard?
Outside the city wall.
Outside the city walls. Okay, depending upon what religion is there too. Certain religions don't bury their dead, they move them outside the city walls. Ancient Rome would move them outside the city walls because it's putrefaction, etc., not within the palmarium. We can't have that type of stuff within the palmarium. The palmarium of the city is basically the city footprint up until the walls, at least in ancient Rome, and then that grew from there. Okay? But the idea, it's basically in Rome, out of Rome. So when we have issues like that, what does that tell us about it? And this is where we get into the idea of how we can create emergent storytelling. So if I create a narrative, if I create a cosmology within my world, I'm going to use a big, huge word there. And when I say cosmology, usually this is having to do with the cosmos and how the worlds revolve around each other and the whole thing, the pantheons of the gods, the whole thing. But this affects what's happening inside of this. If you look at Game of Thrones, you have the religion of the old gods and the seven and the Lord of Light and all that, and all their believers worship and practice in different ways. And this leads to how the arrangements of those various cities and factions act. This is why Winterhome has this big, huge, giant tree, because they're old worshippers of the gods, whereas the new areas inside of King's Landing, since they're worshippers of the seven, have like those types of churchly factions, where if you go down to Dorne, there's different things there. This is all having to do with the cosmology and the world building, and it has to do with the believability of what is happening inside of that. So when you're talking about creating content generators, if you enforce certain rules inside of them, if you limit what you're able to do, if you bind yourself to those requirements, now later on when you make a change to your narrative, you need to go back and look at that generator and see where is it placing these things and does it meet with that new culture. If it doesn't meet with that culture, you can now have opportunities for emergent storytelling because you've made something that the player goes, why is that over there? Now the big thing with this is you need to somehow enforce this also in the player's mind if this is not something that's normal. So how would I enforce the fact that undead are in the graveyard outside of the town? What would I do in the preceding areas?
Do a rule of three. Introduce the concept that church next to graveyard, get church next to graveyard, break it, it's yours.
Ah, okay, so rule of three, so show opportunities. So you'll have to see where is your player moving through your space and provide those opportunities before they get there. And maybe even highlight those opportunities. So have a story point, and maybe if this is more of a rail shooter, then if this was a rail shooter more than if it was a, open world game, have the player come upon a burial happening within the city walls in one of those previous areas. This is the death practices within our culture. Let me show you an example of it. As you come to the next part, right? Instead of having the funeral, maybe the grave digger is there going, and digging up a grave in the next graveyard and talks to you, and you can ask him questions about, various things. Now you come upon the third city, things are different. And you can add a bit of mystery inside of this. Maybe even have be one of the options for the dialogue choices or something along there. Why is your graveyard on the outside of the city? And if the player selects that, they go, I don't want to talk about it. Right? Highlight it in some different way. So now you've created this kind of narrative build-up to it via the world itself, via the rules that happen within this world. This is showing that it's out of place. And if I show you something that's out of place, what's going to happen? You're going to get, You're going to have questions about it. You're going to get curious. If I said this is the way it's done, and I've shown you how it's done, and then I break that, You want to know why. You're going to ask questions, you're going to investigate, and then you're going to put them onto a narrative. Do I need a little quest marker above someone's head for that? No, because you're going to create that inside of your player. You're going to have them want to find out more by investigation and by just seeing that within the storyline. Okay. Conversely, don't trick your player with these. If you've built up that the graveyard is beside the church and all these and you don't have a storyline to go with it, don't break that pattern. So you need to tell the generator or whatever you're using in terms of storylines, don't break that pattern, enforce this pattern. If we go back into just software design principles and et cetera, you've probably heard hard constraints, soft constraints, et cetera. Heard of hard and soft constraints? Okay. I see some nodding, some.
What is it in regards
Huh?
to? What is it in regards to?
Any sort of software development having to do with requirements.
Oh,
Yes, you probably heard of soft constraints, hard constraints,
yeah.
right?
Like when people tell other people to do.
Well, a hard constraint is you may not. You shalt not.
Yeah.
Right? So if you violate that, you're done.
Yeah.
There could also be soft constraints. You shouldn't do this, but you may violate this rule. So when you should try to always do it this way, but in the event that you cannot, it's not the worst of the worlds, but it's better if you did. Okay? I'm doing some electrical work in my house right now. All new lamps come with a ground wire because ground wires are good and they keep your house from catching on fire. What you should do is connect the ground wire that's inside of your wiring to the lamp. Now here's the problem. This was not a requirement on houses because of the code way back in the 1960s when my house was built. So I opened up a panel. There's no ground wire. I should connect that in. But in the event that you don't have a ground wire, the breaker box itself is the ground. So there's a little green screw that you unscrew and you put that wire against the breaker box and you ground it to the breaker box. Huh? It's not as safe because what if the breaker box isn't grounded? But that's now a difference between a hard and a soft constraint. So that's a soft constraint. If I am in this position, I do it this way, but otherwise, etc. Either way works, but I would prefer the other way. A hard constraint would be if the code said, if you don't have a ground wire inside of your thing, the house is condemned. Okay, that's a hard constraint, right? Like you have to put that in or the house is condemned. Okay, and now there's lots of things that I could do with the electrical that would have my house condemned because that's not how that works. This is one of the reasons why I should go and get my engineering license so I can just sign off on anything. No, I didn't say that. Hi, Ian.
Is that my little lad?
It's Ian. Yeah. And so when you're working with anything where you're doing a generator, the question is also, what is a hard constraint? What is a soft constraint? So if it's a hard constraint, the generator should not even be either A, if it creates it, it has to destroy it and start over. So it could generate, test, say, doesn't meet with the hard constraint, stop doing that. Or B, your generator should never be able to create it in the first place. B is better. B is much better. Think about an unplayable level. So a hard constraint might be a level has to have an exit that is reachable from the entrance. Okay, so if say I was creating a maze has to have what? An entryway and an exit way, and there has to be one path that leads between them, minimally. Okay, can I check for that algorithmically? Yeah. Yeah, so I could use a pathfinding algorithm, and if the pathfinding algorithm fails, my level, my level fails, and that's a hard constraint. And I have a way of testing for it, so therefore I test for the hard constraint. If not the case, throw that level away. The other thing is, I could, as the first step of my algorithm, force a path between those 2 points.
Right. And say, don't generate anything here.
No, just put the block such that it is reachable. Done. Okay, so those 2 ways to get around that hard constraint. One is we generate and test, and we say, do I violate the hard constraint? If violate the hard constraint, throw away. Or I can say, here is the pathway from start to finish, hard constraint satisfied, move on. Now there could be, however, some soft constraints. Soft constraint could be something like maximize the distance between the start and the end. A good maze should maximize the distance between start and the end. Would we agree with that? Yes and no.
If you maximize it, you're just going to go like this squiggly.
Yeah, it might just be a really squiggly snake. Okay. So I want, maybe that's part of a larger equation. So maybe I want it to be at least 75% of the size. Maybe that's now a soft constraint that I'm aiming for. Maximize this. Or maybe I have a hard constraint that says if it's under 75%, throw away. Okay, depends how I put this out. Then maybe mazes are more difficult if there's dead ends. So maybe I want to also have something that maximizes or increases the number. I want to give some amount of points to dead ends. And so a good equation for my maze would be longest path plus number of dead ends to some weightedness, some weighted average, right? And if you're confused about a weighted average, just think about 100% is your grade in a course, and each element within the course has to sum to 100%, and there's a weight against that. That's a weighted average. You've done them to death. If you're inside of any sort of higher education, you understand weighted averages. Okay? So maybe there's a weighted average that gives me what that value on each of those soft constraints is that sums to best level ever. If the best level ever is 100, then if it has this many of this and it has this many of that, it's the 100. Maybe I can put one that's lower than that, lower than that, lower than that.
Right, so you have a cumulative score of how much it conforms to your restraints.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and you want to maximize that score via your searching algorithm. Okay, so you have your randomness that then generates and creates that. Okay, so when you're evaluating a generator, that's really the principles that you're looking for. Is you're thinking about what is the hard constraints, what's the soft constraints, what's the believability within my world, how do I quantize these things in a way that a computer can come up with them where I don't have to go back to a human being and make that question. And the final bit of this is, how controllable is it? So if I make a very slight change in my equation here, in my weights, does the level that it generates, are they close enough to that via it? Can I get something that looks the way that I want it to look like? And this is a little bit of a harder evaluation, a harder way of going about it. And that really turns into knack. My best advice if you're doing any sort of these generators is have like a little display function where you can go through and look at different seeds, what they'll produce, and show multiple different versions of it to get a sense of it. And this is where Gavin's favorite thing comes back in. Yeah. Right.
I can tell you had a lot of trouble.
I don't actually mind statistics, it's just not.
Okay, so with that, I want to, I think maybe groups of 3, 4, something like that? 4? Okay, I'm going to have you group up. Actually, no, for First, I want you to think on your own for a little while. Does anybody have a game that they're working on right now? Okay, think about a game that you're working on right now or that you'd like to work on. I want you to take 10 minutes, think about that game, and I want you to write down 3 places that you could do some form of procedural content inside of that game. So 3 places that you could add a procedurally generated element. Then I want you to write down 3 good things, maybe 1 for each, about why that would help that game. And then I want you to write 3 potential pitfalls, detriments, roadblocks to using that. Okay? Do we got that? So 3 places in your selected game that you think that you could use a generator, 3 good things, 3 roadblocks, detriments, bad things about using PCG. Okay, can everybody do that? Okay, let's take 10 minutes to do that, and then we're gonna go into teams to discuss. Hi, Ian.
Hey, how you doing?
You got a Moomin bag.
Yeah.
Are you a Moomin fan?
Yeah.
Oh, you're a Moomin? Okay. Yeah, I've been through So what I'd like you to do, if you haven't already, find a partner and describe your selections and your picks for this and vice versa, okay? So let's go through that. Find a partner, or if you need more than a partner, then grab a few more people and discuss between yourselves on it.